Hi everyone, welcome to another release of Ari Studio, version 23 Taka. We are going to sort of whiz through a lot of features that are quite complicated and probably require more in-depth analysis than we give time for in this demo. The reason being that some of these features are just infrastructural, we explained that in the release notes. This is sort of the beginning of adding these infrastructure bits. It's not the end result, and it is possible, it's likely that it will change over time as we start to connect the dots. So we're not really going to spend huge amounts of time explaining all the details there is to these features, because they're liable to change over time. But the main purpose of this is to start introducing them, and over time we will start to integrate them, as I'll explain in a minute. Start to integrate them together. So in order for this demo to be slightly reasonable in terms of time, stay within sort of the half an hour boundary, we are going to just basically go a bit quicker than we should really across a lot of features. So I've already started here the market simulator. The main reason why is because for some reason the market simulator is taking a few seconds to start at present. It's not entirely sure why, so we need to investigate that in the next release, and that's exactly what I meant about things changing over time slightly. So the purpose of the market simulator is to simulate different kinds of market data items. At present we only simulate two types, and even those we simulate it as a sort of a basic way. We simulate FX rates, which we already had previous release, and we've expanded a bit on those, and we started at the beginnings of what it is for interest rates, interest rate simulation. So we're sort of working through all the different components that you need in order to generate the full coverage of market data, and eventually the objective is to make this realistic. So at present it's very, very not realistic, but in order to make it realistic we first have to start with this phase. So what exactly do we do for rates? So in reality the rates are following on from the pattern that we created for spots, for FX spots. It's not hugely different. So as you can see here, and I just detected a bug, we don't seem to have UI elements correct for the rates in there, but nonetheless, so as you can see here, the idea is very, very similar. We still haven't got full coverage, so we don't really have all the items that we've implemented in FX, such as, for example, the notion of vintage, which I'll explain in a second. But that's the second step for this exercise, because it became quite complex. So we're trying to split things up as much as possible. So at present, all you can do really is you can configure the rate that you're about to create. For each currency, you've got the indexes available to that currency. At the moment, there's not huge amounts of indexes. So, for example, for Aussie, all we've got is Aeonia. And of course, if you open up something like, let's say, something slightly more expected like Euro, you have Ester, and for GBP, you're going to have Sonia, right? So at present you don't have IBOR, and it's only single curve, so this is all very, very simple. But nonetheless, what you can do is you've got access to one of these three stochastic processes. You can configure them, and it provides sort of a very basic interface here that enables you to configure the different parameters of the engine. We decided to re-implement all this logic. It was simple enough in Claude, and I was going to use Quantlib to avoid spending too much time playing around with low-level maths code. But it was simple enough using Claude. I mean, of course, probably what we should probably do, which we haven't done yet, we should probably cover all the tests that we've got in Quantlib. We should make sure that we have the same amount of coverage to make sure that these are working properly. But at present, the basic implementation is working. So hopefully this should all be straightforward for those that are familiar with this sort of interface. You can configure the variables that are used to control the process, such as cap, for example, here, and so on. And then you've got a really simple screen here that shows you the sample paths. You can increase the sample paths a little bit, play around with the parameters, and so on. Now, of course, you would not fail to notice the very first problem here is these interest rates, they're moving a lot. I guess you see this quite quickly. And the numbers here are quite large, even for something like CIR, Vasicek and Whole White, you'd expect slightly less realistic prices. But in all these cases, the numbers are huge. They're very large. Vasicek, of course, generates possibly negative changes in the interest rates. But the gist of it is that none of these numbers make a huge amounts of sense at present, and the reason why they don't make huge amounts of sense at present is because they are not they're not really taking into account the time span that we use for the DT. So we try to explain that in the release notes. Hopefully there's a slightly better interpretation of what I'm trying to tell you here. But if you see here, we are the processes are moving a lot faster than they should. So what you really want to do is you need to scale them down to the tick size. So if the time tick is very small, then you'd expect that to have a much smaller impact, much smaller movement. But we haven't quite got to that yet. So at the moment, it is as if you're moving by days rather than by, I don't know, seconds, for example, or minutes, or whatever it is that you're scaling it by. So there's some analysis required exactly to understand how we're going to do that. But we wanted to release this anyway because all the common infrastructure that's required in order to make the stochastic processes work and the distribution of the market data and so on, all of that has been implemented and seems to work okay. However, the numbers themselves are not fantastically great. So that is the objective of this release, really, is just to get the infrastructural bits in place. And to be fair, I'm not entirely sure if one more release will be enough to get these numbers correct, because, of course, we've already, as we said with FX, we already have the issue that the ticks are all arriving, they're all together, all bunched up. So there's no stochastic in the tick arrival. That's something that needs to be done as well in terms of realisticness. But I guess tick arrival is not quite as pressing as the fact that the numbers themselves are far too large for realistic market conditions. So it's going to be, as it has been so far, it's going to be sort of a slow release where every sprint we try to make things slightly better, and then hopefully over a course of about 4 or 5 sprints the numbers start to actually look vaguely realistic. Our ultimate objective is to try to get closer to sort of stuff that Thies and Jorg generate from their tooling, but of course it will take us a while in order to do that. But anyway, enough rambling on this. So you can see here, you can now control the basic features of some stochastic processes that are related to generation of interest rates. It will generate a single curve, so there's no multi-curve. And you can also, which I think is quite useful, you can configure the curve that you generate. So for a bit of context, when you're creating the market data, when you're simulating market data, especially in the case of rates, you can't just randomly simulate each tenor, because if you do that, and same thing with, say, for example, a volatility surface, if we were allowed all these stochastic processes to evolve in an uncorrelated fashion across all the tenor space, and in the case of volatility surface across all the 3 dimensions of the volatility surface, you will end up with nonsense, really, because none of the points will make sense in terms of the entire surface or entire curve. So instead what you do is, and I hope this is my correct understanding of the techniques used by people like Jorg and so on, is you have this notion of a latent object, and the latent object is effectively you simulate as if you're generating an entire curve, and then you disaggregate that curve into quotes per buckets, which are the tenors effectively, and it appears as if you're generating these separately, but in reality you are generating them for the purposes of an entire curve, and that then guarantees that the curve as a whole makes sense. Of course, then you probably will then say, well, that's not particularly realistic, because when I'm observing the market and I'm seeing the quotes streaming in, there is no latent curve as such. There is a lot of noise on the latent curve. We haven't quite got that far yet. I assume that what you do is you create some noise, some tenor space, and you'd move around these points a little bit. So perhaps maybe you create 4 or 5 quotes around the point of the latent curve. There's something that requires some analysis still, but presumably that's the best way to do this, because what you really want to do is you still want users at the end to have to bootstrap a yield curve. And in order to bootstrap the yield curve, to make their life slightly harder, you need this noise, right? Otherwise, your bootstrapped yield curve is just going to be identical to your latent curve, and there will be no difficulty, right? Which then means you're not going to learn how to bootstrap a yield curve. So we haven't quite got that far yet, but you can imagine the kind of issues that we're going to have. You've got the sort of the list of instruments that you have available in the system, which we have to do this for the purposes of this feature. And we also had to do lots of work around tenors because we didn't really have tenor support. So now if you go to reference data and you look around, you'll see that there's a lot of classes related to tenors, which we needed to add in order to be able to support this feature. So there was a lot of work around that then as well. So yeah, this was a feature that was quite difficult to implement, but quite satisfying. And like I say, just when you think you're getting anywhere close to finishing something, there was quite a lot of problems. It's definitely going to be something that we're going to have to work on over time. So that is that for interest rate curves. So what we'll do now is I'm just going to go in order of the release note to make our life easier. As part of this work as well, we've also did some work on the other side of generation, which is the sort of the market data consumption. So this site just produces the market data and it simulates what you'd see coming out of a Bloomberg or Reuters feed. The other side of it is common to whatever the source is, and that's basically how we process the market series coming out of whatever it is that is your tick source. So we'll do this to make our life easier. Let's just close a few things here. So as you can see here, we've got a lot of data here for different types of market data. I think we're ticking on the end, so I'm not sure why it's not showing anything. One of the problems we have as well is something else that we need to look into. We generate a lot of data, so I suspect these screens are not coping very well with the volume of data. I'll leave that running in the background while we wait. But of course we're more interested in rates, so I just suspect spots are just too much data in spots, and that's why it's not coming up. So if I go here to one of these curves, I mean, let's just stick to euro, I think, just to make euro or dollar, just to make life slightly easier. So as you can see here, this is the ticks on per tenor basis that are streaming in. There's a lot of these. We still haven't implemented paging here, which is probably one reason why Spot is just becoming a little bit out of control, because of course we're ticking Spot a lot faster, as you'd expect. So I suspect what's happening here, I'll leave that running, but I suspect what's happening here is that Spot is ticking too fast, and there's too much data, and because without paging, this is just, it's probably even bursting the NATS message queue limit, which is a problem we had that I thought we fixed. So in fact, let's just not worry about Spot right now and focus on rates. So as you can see, we're ticking the different tenors, and you can, if you wish, you can see a chart for those tenors. So for the curve, I should say. Let's see. Or you should be able to, interestingly enough, don't seem to be able to plot the chart. Well, this is the cursor demos. So it was possible until not long ago. I mean, you can see here the screenshots that we took. Oh, actually, I think we have a different editor. Yes, I'm forgetting myself. I think what we've done is we created a special editor for market series. This is something that we, it's probably going to start happening more and more over time. In the beginning, we were hopeful that we could just have a single market series here, and then from the market series, you could just visualize everything. But it kind of makes more sense to have specialized editors. As soon as you go through it, you know, like any other trading system, you'd see that each different market data type's got their own peculiarities, and then you end up needing something to help with the display of those peculiarities. So for rates, for example, you don't just want to see the ticks being streamed, you want to see the notion of a curve, and you want to see the curvature, although it's not exactly curvature, but you see, you want to plot the curve over time on those buckets. So you don't necessarily want to actually see the 1 month tenor ticking. what you really want to see is you want to see the curve ticking. So, and here you got the notion of time. So what this enables you to do is it enables you to see the curve evolving over time, and it enables you to see, to compare the movement of the curve over time. Again, like I said, you can see that these basis points are just a little bit too wild. We're seeing a 10,000 basis points swing in the space of about 10 minutes, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. In the real market, it would be a lot less than that, of course. So hopefully when we start to address these issues with the process, you start to see these things ticking in a slightly more controlled, slightly less wild manner, which is what we're hopefully going to work on for Sprint 24. And as part of this exercise, just like we had to do a lot of work on tenors, we started also doing a lot of work on calendars. Again, on tenors we were slightly more successful. We managed to finish the tenors. It was quite a lot of work, but we did manage to complete it. But not so much with calendars. We did a lot of the infrastructure for calendars, but we bumped into some complications, and then we ended up not being able to finish calendars by the end of the sprint. But there is a lot of reference data already for calendars now, and there's an attempt to link the calendars with the currency pairs. So if you choose a currency pair, for example, euro-dollar, for instance, it's starting to give you some kind of linkage between these two. If you edit a currency pair convention, you can see here the associated calendars for that currency pair. However, you still can't see the individual calendars, and there's some analysis required. So we need to understand exactly how we're going to map this from Quantlib, because really we have a notion of a calendar template that instantiates per year that then generates the different holidays and so on. And so we didn't quite get as far as doing all of that analysis this sprint. But we got the basics of calendaring working, which is the requirement in order to be able to move to the next step. And of course, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this functionality, but in order to calendars and tenors are underlying to the curve generation, because once you start to create the curves, the next thing you're going to need is dates against these tenors. As you can see at the moment, there are no dates against tenors, right? So if you open up a curve, this is not very useful, because when you see a curve, actually this is just listing the curve. So what we're going to do is close this guy here, and let's just stick to the snapshot here. So as you can see here, you can see tenors, but you can't see dates. And the reason why you can't see, I mean, we could have put non-computed dates or basic computed dates, which would be a date that ignores public holidays and does not ignore public holidays and business days and so on, which would basically give you a random date, which would probably be a weekend or something like that. But as soon as we started looking into how dates were going to work, we realized that there's no point of making a basic implementation because we have no use. So it's better to just try to implement all the calendaring infrastructure first. Then once you've got calendars, you can start to compute dates for the different tenors, different buckets. And once you've got those, then you can start to display the date on the tenor correctly here. So that all will be work that we will look into for Sprint 24. So that's calendars. And the next thing is related to the work we've done in the previous sprint, which was in the previous sprint we've got the market simulator working, and here now, because I closed it, you'll see the time it takes to load. Because we got the market simulator working for FX, the next logical thing was to see spot rate matrices for those pairs. And the idea is, of course, to have a usual cross rates matrix with the non-arbitrage conditions and spanning tree and all the goodies that we're used to basically in a regular trading system. As you saw there, it just started catching up. So you can open up a cross rates matrix. We support 3 or 4 of these, and we've got reciprocals as well, which we implemented that this sprint as well. I'm not entirely sure these charts are particularly reasonable at present. Something else we don't have to work in at the moment, but everything else should be vaguely working. We've also made it so that any conventions that we have, not entirely sure if this was already here last sprint or not, but like I showed you a second ago, when we go to conventions, there is a currency pair conventions, which set things like the pip factor, the number of decimal places, and so on. And we plug that into the cross rates matrix, so that the numbers you see here are respecting conventions. So that bit is done. And then, of course, you've got all the different kinds of cross rates matrix that people are used to. And at present, you can't really create arbitrary matrices. But actually, to be honest, I'm lying slightly. You can create. This is basically the reference data for the matrix, and you are able to create it. But the problem is, because the reference data is we use code generation quite a lot, so the types are all disaggregated, if you like. In other words, you need to understand the data model in order to be able to create a rates matrix. It's not quite that straightforward. I mean, it's not impossible either, but it's not as easy as it should be, really. What you really want is a dialog, maybe a wizard even, a new spot rates matrix or something, that takes you to the different stages of creation, where you create a topology configuration, for instance, and then you determine what pairs are going to be enabled, and which ones you are interested in deriving, and which pairs are the driver pairs. Effectively, all the different configuration bits for a CRM. And then once you've done that, then the CRM itself it's just a rendering, the joining of the dots of those configuration elements. So it's sort of fairly straightforward, but it does require you to understand these three different distinct bits of data in order to join them together. So we didn't really have enough time to do that bit of work, the wizard or some kind of joining together with market data. But the basic CRM is working. As we say on the release notes, the CRM does not take into account interest rates. So going back again to, as we saw here, if we go into the currency pair conventions, you can see here that there's this notion of, actually you can't see here exactly, but if you open up one of these pairs, let's say we choose something like euro-dollar, you can see, interestingly enough, well, this is where things get slightly confusing, because there's parts of the elements that are, I think maybe we need to work a bit on modeling here. So parts of the elements are configured directly within the conventions, and the other parts of the elements are configured within the currency pair. So it's a little bit confusing even for myself. Okay, the currency pair is only worried about the classification, but we're missing Spotlag for some reason. Let me just think about this for a second. This is the curse of demos. I think we have yet another place, and clearly you can see this is not ideal because even I'm getting confused. I think I know what the problem is. The problem is, again, because there's so many different moving parts to this. I suspect what's happening here is that if I open up one of these currencies, in fact it doesn't really matter which currency any of these would do. Right, here we basically control the precision on a per currency basis. So we're just missing one configuration element. I can't quite for the life of me remember which one it is, but somewhere around here we have the spot lag. Which I was convinced it was going to be at the level of the currency pair conventions, that is. Or maybe what's happened is that we've got a bug here actually, because we've been playing around with code generation quite a lot. It is possible that we lost spot lag. So effectively, how many days there is from today until actual delivery for spot. That is a parameter that is normally configured. It should really be together with the currency pair convention. I think we may have lost it on one of our code gen refactors. I need to look into this again. But effectively, that bit of data is required, and it's needed in order to then compute the values in the CRM, so they can normalize all the currency pairs to the exact same time horizon. So at the moment, you're pretending in the CRM that there is no such thing as spot days, effectively, and everything is that you see quoted here. All currencies are just basically quoting a number and that number it ignores the effect of time and the effect of spot lag. So again, as I said previously, with many features here, you have to start by establishing a baseline and then improving on that. And handling spot lag is something that we have to do in the future, not in this release. I also need to figure out what happened to the exact location of spot lag, so I seem to have lost it. It's also a sign that modeling the data model is not great. See if I can't find things in menus. But then I guess it's a problem when you've got I don't know, over 150 PRs being merged in a sprint of about 10, I don't know, 15 days maybe. There's a lot of stuff going on, so your brain starts to frazzle a little bit. Once we've done all these bits, the next we will have a quick look. One thing I probably should mention now, you won't fail to notice that the menus look quite different. We spent some time reorganizing the menus. The main reason why is just like with the spot lag, we couldn't find anything anymore. Menus were getting very, very confusing. And you see we still have bugs. For example, business units shows up here and here. That's the correct one. I think this is legacy. Yeah, exactly. This is pointing to some legacy endpoint. Doesn't exist anymore. So we kind of tidied up all the menus. Should be a little bit better. You got the main functionality here, and then the rest of the supporting data is now hidden in a slightly more sensible order, so that you should be able to find things a bit quicker. As part of that effort, we also moved a lot of stuff to operations, which is a bit of a miscellaneous menu. Perhaps this will evolve over time too. And we also managed to break the librarian just as we're finishing the sprint with code generation. But nonetheless, it is still functional enough that you can demonstrate the feature that I was going to talk about, which is it was very difficult to understand the data sets. The screens for the data sets were very unreadable with so much stuff, and you couldn't see anything. I already spotted a problem here, which is Gleif does not seem to have a description. We should really have a description here, so it's another thing to look into. But anyway, if we look at ISO coding schemes, you can see that there's a description here. This is all much more readable now. You can see all the different elements and dimensions regarding the data set. You can see all the aspects of the methodology, and there's a card for that data set, which is really one-stop shop for you to know exactly the data that you're setting up, where did the data come from. And this is something that we try really hard. We try not to put any data in the system unless there's a very good data lineage around it. And so this will help ensure that that continues to be the case. Another feature that we worked on this sprint, which was also quite useful, we improved and generalized the way history is managed for all data items. So if you click on a currency or any data item that has got changes over time, now you see a timeline, and then with that timeline you can then see a GitHub-like diff screen that enables you to then hone in very quickly as to what's changed for that particular entity. And then you can see also any commentary they may have associated with that change, as well as the usual change notification or change control, should I say, tags that the change has. So this is quite useful. It's quite realistic as well, because in a trading system you have to be very, very careful about what changes what. So we wanted to make sure this looked exactly like it does in the real trading system. So that was quite useful. And I think this probably is it for the core screens. Like I say, we have extensive notes here on the limitations of all of these screens. There are lots of them. And as a whole, the application continues to be not particularly useful just yet. Unfortunately, until we finish everything, you won't be able to actually make use of these bits. I mean, you can play with it, of course, but in order to make it really, really useful, like for example, in order to price something, you need to finish everything. So we will just continue to tackle these one at a time as we go along. So what else were we up to this sprint? So whilst I was playing in this sort of Jorgen Theis land, which is all fun and games, I tried to also tick the actual infrastructural work that I was supposed to be working on. So we spent a lot of time cleaning up code generation. It's getting quite close to the point now where you can just add a new entity, and the entity is added across the stack, which is good. Not quite there yet, but very close. And once we've done that, then hopefully we can kick back into life the HTTP endpoints and the Witty screen as well. So hopefully that's not too far from there now. We also spend a lot of time playing with our own server architecture. Some of this is, well, not dissimilar to the CodeGen work, because as we tidy things up for CodeGen, we end up finding problems. But certain things were not actually, it's just strictly speaking CodeGen work. For instance, for CRM, we ended up requiring a generic caching mechanism. It was for CRM, but it was also for to solve a bug that we haven't quite completely solved, which is related to caching data related to parties and counterparties. Which reminds me as well, we've spent a lot of time code generation wise cleaning up counters and counterparties, and this was not trivial. And the reason why, of course, is because counters and counterparties and parties are the first types of entities that we're dealing with that are composite, I should say. By that, what we mean is a counterparty and a party, unlike currencies, where we can disaggregate all the elements of the currency, and we don't necessarily need to see the object model as a graph. For parties and counterparties, immediately as you start displaying them, you need this composition aspect. For example, you need to see the hierarchy, you need to see the different identifiers associated with the counterparty, and you've got contact information and so on. So because of that, we needed to think quite deeply about how we model object graphs, I guess. So spent a lot of time cleaning all of that up in CodeGen. It's not quite finished as with everything else, but I think we're close to that. We also did some cleanup on books and portfolios. I don't think there's anything particularly useful to show. They look vaguely like they did before, but they are now clean and 100% code generated, so which is the bit that we're trying hard to get to. As you can see here, everything just shows up as expected. I mean, this doesn't look particularly impressive because we already had books and portfolios, but this is all coming straight out of code generation with minor handcrafting, which is what we wanted. I think, and then of course we have the usual hot fixes and so on. So I think overall it's been a pretty decent sprint. As you can see here, the number of PRs and the number of commits was high. We're averaging some days 25, 20 PRs. So it's been high. Still, we probably should have more PRs and less chunky PRs. So what we really want is to see the number of PRs going up and the number of commits per PR going down. In fact, to be honest, we probably need a metric here, which is useful, which is number of commits per PR, because the number of commits per PR is very, very high still. As you can see here, probably in this, this is kind of isomorphic to that, because the longer the cycle time is for a PR, the more commits the PR is going to have. And you can see here that a lot of PRs are on the 8-day sort of range, and then we have these outliers that are crazy for like 16 days, for example, for a PR and so on, which is really not great. So what we really want is lots and lots and lots of small PRs that we just start, complete, ship, go to the next one. But what tends to happen with us is that we get a little bit lost in the PRs, and then it becomes a little bit out of control. So we definitely need to improve on that. But overall, it was very, very sort of decent sprint. A lot of features added. I mean, we've had a total of 150 PRs in the span of about 10 days, so that's not too bad. So it means, I think what this means is that the basics of both MASD and cybernetics being applied to the LLM are starting to work, because we're starting to see the number of PRs merged going up and the number of features in the sprint going up. So that's a sign that the process is working a bit better, which is really what we wanted. We wanted slowly to see more and more features coming in shorter space of time, because that demonstrates that the velocity is increasing. Whereas before, perhaps we'd have a lot less PRs and we spend a lot more time faffing around with AI to get things to ship. Now I think in this sprint we spend more time playing around with the domain. I mean, one thing I didn't mention, which is probably quite a useful thing to mention, is every time we implement a feature, we do some analysis. And so if you go to our website, all of this is just part of the regular website. I mean, you see a lot of things failing here because we're faffing around, but the build should be green soon, should stabilize. So if you go to the website, you will see that there is a knowledge base here where our knowledge graph comes from. And so every time we start a topic, we always try to create an in-depth document about that topic, which takes advantage of LLMs and takes advantage of my knowledge of the subject, plus the LLMs, plus the internet, really. So we summarize everything we know on a certain topic, like for example, say currency pairs, and then we create these pages, which we call hub pages, which contain all the different aspects of the thing we're researching. This is all obviously LLM generated, but I read through everything the LLM generates, and I try to make sure that this makes vague sense according to my understanding of a topic. Sometimes I also learn a bit about a topic, but up to now it's been mainly just double checking to make sure that the knowledge that I'm feeding the LLM is in line with the knowledge that I have of a subject. And so you will find that there's a lot of documentation about every topic from a domain perspective, explaining what that topic is, why this is necessary, and if there's any rules, the rules around it, and so on. This is not an end result, again, this is not the end of this work, but it probably needs like a second layer of cleanup once we've got the basics in. Like for instance, these hub pages may not necessarily be the best, and there's still a lot of bullet points without explaining things around and so on. But the starting point is not too bad. And of course we started as well, as part of the cleanup, we started documenting a little bit better the different aspects of the system. I mean, it still needs work, but you can see here for each different entity type we started to create these chapters that give you good coverage of the functionality of the system. Again, most of this is automated. I do read through everything the system generates, but we do want to make, as we say here quite clearly, we want to make use as much as possible of the LLMs. So I think that we should just end up here, because this demo is going to become a bit too large otherwise. But I think it gives you a good overview what's inside of this sprint. Like I say, start of the road, probably still a bit to go. Next sprint, hopefully we'll start to see things becoming slightly more realistic, but a lot more infrastructural work to go from maybe about 3 or 4 sprints. I suspect until we get to a point where we're generating more complex market data, such as vol surfaces and so on, and start to bootstrap yield curves and so on, the system will not be particularly useful as such. But we all got all of that to look forward to. Okay, thanks for watching, and